like to welcome you to another episode of The Charm of It, a podcast for knitters who share my fascination with the nitty-gritty details of our craft. If you're a new viewer, I'm so glad that you found your way to my little corner of the internet. And if you're a returning viewer, it's wonderful to see you again. It's been a while, and I could spend like 5 minutes rambling with excuses and apologies, but suffice it to say that you know that I have missed you, and as always, and I'm hoping to return to a more regular recording schedule. I realized that one of the reasons I haven't been recording is because it takes a lot of spoons. For those of you who are new, I have chronic illnesses, and spoon theory is a useful article that I will link below, but spoons are just a way of referring to energy and pain tolerance capacity when dealing with those kinds of things. So recording with my camera, even though it looks pretty, is trickier because I have to get up every few minutes to reset it, and also last time half of it was out of focus, which is really frustrating. So I'm trying to just use the built-in camera of my computer. So the quality is a little sketchier and the lighting isn't as good because this is the wall of windows and my computer is perpendicular to that. So I have a lamp on that side to kind of balance out the shadows. So I apologize for the less than ideal quality, but hopefully the fact that everything will be in focus and that I am recording makes up for that. I am wearing my honeybee cardigan, which is knit out of Quince & Company's Sparrow. They're 100% organic linen yarn in birch, a silvery gray colorway. Actually, the pattern is the honeybee cardigan pattern by Laura Chow, although I did some modifications, like I did the honeycomb bands. And mine is called The Beekeeper's Apprentice, after one of my favorite mystery series by Lori King. I have a very full episode for you today. I've decided not to block out my works in progress and my finished objects anymore. Oh, can you see Thistle behind me? No, the chair blocks it. But she's there. Anyway, because I'm not knitting as much these days, and so once I get on a regular recording schedule, I really won't need to separate those two things out. So I'm going to talk about my finished objects, my works in progress. I have a knitting and literature quote because I came across one last night. Hurrah. I'm going to do a yarn review, and that should about cover it. So I'm not going to discuss a separate topic this week just because there's quite a few finished objects and I'm getting back into the swing of things. So first up, a tiny little finished object. Oh, I love him so much. So this is a gift for a friend. Oh man, I thought I wouldn't have any more focusing issues, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, we'll just keep him back here. And the lighting is really off. He's a different color blue. Anyway, I used the free Songbird pattern, which is available on Ravelry from Rabbit Hole Knits, and it's so cleverly done. And then I also added some embroidery to make it look more like the black-throated blue warbler that it is supposed to be. And as I said, I knit this for a friend. She's a birder, and these are one of her favorite birds. So I think I'll just, well, that would create more work for me. I'll make sure that there are nice photos on the project pages if you're interested in the actual colors. Yeah, I love him very deeply. So I just used leftover sock yarn for the white Cascade Heritage Silk. The black is leftover Knit Picks Gloss Fingering. And then the blue is Nature Spun from Brown Sheep in the Blue Fog colorway, which it's one of my favorite colors of blue. It's just about the same as the shirt I'm wearing. And I use 6mm safety eyes, which I have a bunch of because I tend to make very small toys for people. And yeah, I'm really thrilled with how it came out. This is duplicate stitch, and then I also did just some whip stitch embroidery. It's probably not called whip stitch with embroidery. I don't know what I'm talking about. And then the little black parts of the face are also duplicate stitch, but the pattern is written so that it's really easy to have one color for the back, one for the chest, and then you can do the throat a separate color just because of the way it's written, which is wonderful. It's a very clever pattern. It's really fun to watch it come together. Yeah, so he did take a while, probably about 4 hours, maybe 5, but it was fun watching him come to life. and he's just been sitting in my apartment waiting for the next time I see my friend. So I'm using a different stuffing lately because I noticed that there was a recycled polyfill option, which makes me feel better about using polyfill. So I ordered that, and it's more structured, and so it's much easier to get. Like, so warblers have a very round body, more rather than the pattern is written more for like robin type birds, I would say. So I wanted to make sure that this was stuffed extra round, and the new polyfill made it so easy. And I've noticed, because you can shape it ahead of time and then pop it in, and I've been really pleased with the results. It's a lot easier to use to stuff than the other kind of polyfill that I've used. So I will include the name of that brand on the project page and down below in the show notes in case, like me, you knit quite a few softies but always have trouble stuffing them, which I definitely do. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say, the pattern is written for DK or I think DK weight yarn, and so it makes a larger pattern. If you can see, that bird is knit with the same pattern, and I mean, you can't tell proportion-wise. 1 minute. Okay. So here's one written or knit in, I think, worsted. Yeah, this one was worsted, and this one is fingering. Nature Spun Sport is a really light sport. It's in between finger and sport. And this was on size 1s, and this, I think, was on size 3s. So that shows you, like, the size differential. And that's just because warblers are very small birds. They're very cute. Okay. The rest of the finished objects, well, that's a lie. One of them is also a gift. But there are 2 for me, which is really exciting. I haven't been doing much knitting this year, and so the knitting that I have been doing is more gift knitting because I make people promises that I'm going to knit for them, and then I have to follow through on that. Oh, it feels so weird to not have to be worried about segments ending and starting new ones. It's more relaxing, though. So, I knit myself a pair of socks. Sock knitting is my first love. It's why I got into knitting, and so I'm always happy with socks. And I haven't been knitting myself many pairs because I have quite a few at this point. I've been knitting for a while, but I've noticed that I don't really reach for the ones knit out of yarns that aren't my favorites, and that means that I've been wearing the ones that are my favorites more, so they're busting holes. And I will darn them, but I also thought, maybe some more socks in the rotation would be a good thing to save my favorites. And I'll probably be weeding out my sock collection. Anyway, so these are scrappy socks. I'm calling them my Peppermint Socks, and they're made out of Barocco Ultra Alpaca Fine, which is one of my favorite sock yarns. And then this is the Redwood colorway. This is just the natural, and then where I ran out of red yarn at the very bottom, this is Steel Cut Oats. So 3 other pairs of socks went into the knitting of these, and they're just vanilla socks with the stripes. I did 3 rows in red and 2 rows in cream because in my experience, cream is so bright that it really pops out more. So, I mean, I think these stripes actually look pretty even. And I decided to make them mismatched. Not only because of yarn usage, but also just because I thought, why not try it? So there we go. A 2x2 cuff with the German twisted cast on, which is one of my favorites, as well as Tommy's from Dynamite Trujillo. And then just a heel flap and gusset. I did a slip stitch heel flap rather than a partridge heel flap, just because it's easier to keep track of down at the bottom. And then what else? For the toe, I did do, I think they're called anatomical toes, where you decrease faster on one side than the other so that your big toe has more space. I promise one fits each foot. Yeah. Oh, that's why, because I'm showing them to you like that. Okay. Just because I have found that that's really comfortable for the way my feet are shaped. And when the socks that have worn holes, they've actually mainly worn holes in the toe rather than the heel. So I'm wondering if having a bit less stretching going on in the big toe area will help my socks last longer. I'm also thinking about doing a slip stitch toe, but I didn't try that for these. I knit the first one back in January, and then I had other gift knitting to do, so I put it away, and then I pulled it out to try on, and it was too short, and I had woven in all the ends, which I never do. So then I put it away again. And finally I got it out and unpicked the ends and pulled back and knit a little bit longer for this one. And then I knit the matching one really quickly. So it was nice to have a new pair of socks, even if it is way too hot to wear them. And yeah, so these will be fun to wear for Christmas, obviously, but also for the rest of the year. I like stripes, no matter what the season. Then I finished another long-term project. This is my winter Twilight scarf, and I will caveat this. It's a finished object because the knitting is done and all the ends are woven in. However, I have not blocked it. And I think blocking is going to make quite a big difference because it's garter stitch with mesh, but that's okay. I'm still going to show it to you now. So this was my kind of very simple knitting when we were trying some role-playing games in the winter. And then we haven't done a session in a long time, so it kind of got neglected, and then I was in the mood for something simple and decided that rather than cast on a new project, I should pull this out. So I finished this mainly over the 4th of July weekend. And the pattern is, I can't remember the name of the pattern. It's linked on my project page, of course. It's a paid-for pattern. And what I like about this scarf is that it's reversible. Oh, whoops, I have one more thing to do. I have to fix one more drop stitch. It's reversible, and so it's all garter stitch based, and it starts in the center, which I think is really neat, and then you knit one end and the other end, so it's really easy to match your yarn, or sorry, to use up as much yarn as you want and then match the other side. And it's designed to use 3 colors. And that's what I did. So this darker blue, none of these colors are showing up as accurate. It's really frustrating. We'll see, I might go back to my regular camera. Let's see. Ooh, okay, so if I face it towards the windows, that helps. So the darker blue is Cascade Heritage Silk, which is a superwash merino silk blend in the denim blue colorway. The variegated purple is Madeline Tosh in their Superwash BFL base, which was gifted to me. What was the name? Maybe Sirocco is the color name. It's going to be on the project page. And let me see. I think this is a solid section of that. It's a really pretty purple, blue, pale blue variegation. And then the light blue down at the bottom, which will definitely benefit from blocking, is Eden Cottage Ascom, I think, which is a 100% baby alpaca yarn, and I do not remember the colorway name. It'll also be on the project page. Wow, I am out of practice, guys. But yeah, so you can see there's these stripy sections, and it was a really fun knit. These stripes are done in a really interesting way that I would not have expected. And I did modify it, so I followed the directions for the width for the smaller one, but then I made it longer, so I added rows in each section, and that's because I like really long scarves. Like, I want them to be 8 feet long, even though I am only 5'3". So, yeah, and I wasn't sure if I knit the large width if I would run out of yarn before I had hit the length I wanted. And I did use up, so I had 100 grams of each. I used up almost the full skein of the Madeline Tosh, and then smaller amounts of the Cascade and Eden Cottage, which was also a gift. The exact details are on my Ravelry page. And I'm still thinking about putting some tassels on the bottom. So when I started this, I wasn't sure, here I'll show you what it looks like on, if it was going to be for me or my sister. And now that I've knit it, I think my sister would really love it. She's more sensitive to wool than me, so the fact that these are like super washes and right up near your neck is going to be that merino silk, and I know she loves baby alpaca, and the superwash BFL is really soft and silky too. And these are definitely her color. She looks beautiful in blue and purple. So, and since it's fingering weight, even though it's massive, I think she'll still be able to get use out of it down in South Texas during the cooler months. So yeah, this is going to be her Christmas gift, which I'm really excited about having a Christmas gift done early. So I showed you, that's how I normally wear scarves, but in this case, because of the way the colors vary, I actually like it more if I just wrap it like this, because then you really see more of those colors being shown off. But there'll be lots of different options for her for how to wrap it because it is nice and long. But see, I like that because then you get the different colors. And yeah, once I block it, I'm not going to block for length because it's already quite long. So I'll just block. I don't want to block aggressively, but what stretching I need to do, I'm going to stretch widthwise, not lengthwise. And I have blocking wires, the straight kind, so that'll make it easier, but blocking is really hard on my body, like this kind of blocking, because you have to bend over, and so that's why I will probably wait until much closer to Christmas to block it, but I'm really happy that it's done. I really like how it turned out. I think maybe some tassels on the bottom, maybe with all three colors, I haven't decided, but Changing Light, that's the name of the pattern. And the pattern was really well written. It was easy to follow. And as I said, modifying it for length was super easy. I just threw in some extra repeats in every section to keep the same proportions. Really pleased with that. Using up stash. Two more finished objects. I have been busy, I guess. But what's funny is, with the exception of the sweater, I finished all of these within maybe the last 2 weeks. Like, I just went a long time without picking up my knitting needles. So I will show you some neckwear for me first. This is my Moondust Cowl. This was a really quick knit. So I used the Star Shower Cowl pattern, which is paid for on Ravelry. And it's written for fingering weight, but I used a worsted weight yarn and I just modified it. So I knit it on size 9s, and I stopped a lot earlier, and so that made it like a 2-day project. Here you can't really see the end, but there it is. And this beautiful yarn is Malabrigo Rios, which is 100% superwash merino. It was a gift in the Sandbank colorway, which is an absolutely gorgeous shade. It's kind of where purple meets beige meets gray, so kind of mauve, and it's so beautiful. So as soon as I saw the skein, I knew I wanted to work it up immediately, and I had one 100-gram skein, so I thought this cowl would be perfect for it because it's easy to stop, but because of the way it's constructed, the pattern is really clever. You get much more yarn at the front, so if you don't have a ton of yarn, then the yarn is kind of going where it needs to look nice and substantial. And since it's a superwash, with cowls, I don't need to worry about it stretching out the way I would with a hat or something. So I am so pleased with how this turned out. You can see the specifics for how I modified it to be a cowl on the project page, but essentially all I did was I joined it in the round sooner, and then I stopped in section 4. I knew I was playing Yarn Chicken, so I thought I could make a little bit more of section 4, but then when I was binding off, I found that I was running out of yarn, so I ripped back and redid section 4 to be even shorter, but I think it turned out really nicely. It just looks like a border, you know. I think it still looks intentional. And yeah, as I said, this was a really quick, relaxing project, and I love this pattern, and this is the first time I've knit it for me. I've knit 3 other versions of it as gifts. So it's really nice to finally have one of my own. And I wear cowls a lot in the cooler months. I find I tend to wear my scarves as outerwear, whereas my cowls I just wear as part of an outfit all day. So this will definitely get a lot of use. What was I going to say? Oh, I started on size 8s because I tend to be a loose knitter. And so I didn't want to go up too far, but 8s just weren't giving me the drape I want. And the interesting thing is this cowl is designed to have some beautiful drape, but the Star Shower pattern itself tends to draw in a little because you're slipping stitches. So I went ahead and went up to the 9, and after blocking, it definitely relaxed a lot. I probably could have kept it on the 8s, but I really like how the fabric turned out on the 9s. I don't know how durable it'll be, but for a cowl, that's probably like the least friction-y thing that you can wear as knitwear, other than a hat, I suppose. So I think it'll be fine. And it's just the most beautiful color. That's a little more true, but it's a lot paler in real life. There's another pattern that Hilary Smith Callis, I think that's her name, put out using that same type of shawl cowl hybrid with one of the wavy patterns. I can't remember the name of it, I'm sorry. But I'm eyeing that, and I think I might buy myself that because I've knit that Star Shower cowl one so many times. So I find it a very clever way to make a cowl that's the size I want to wear with even less yarn than a regular cowl, because the other kind of cowls I knit, I want to be able to loop them at least twice so that they look nice and full. But that takes more yarn and more knitting time. Okay, finally I have a sweater to show you, so I will disrobe. You know I like you because I'm going to put on a wool sweater even though it is summer here and I have to turn off all the fans to record and don't have air conditioning. I did wait until a cooler day to record, but it's still in the mid-70s, so. Okay. So, you saw this sweater in the last episode. It is based on the Wet Wang pattern by Anne Kingston. Every time I think that I have become more mature and won't giggle, and then I always giggle. Which is a pullover pattern, and I adapted it to be a cardigan, and then I switched it from top down to bottom up because I was running into some fitting issues, which I have definitely not mastered yet. Okay, so you can see there's still fit issues, and that's really why I was buttoning it up, was so that you could see that. I didn't want to disguise it. And I knit this using Quince & Company Chickadee, which is their 100% wool sport weight yarn in Chanterelle is the background color, and just their undyed 100-gram skein, like straight from the mill. I used for cream because they were out of the other cream yarn. The other adaptation I did was to add these scallops to the sleeves and also the waist. Here I can stand up and show you, maybe. The blouse I'm wearing is poofy. There we go. So this is the way that I tend to wear it the most. It's how I tend to wear all my cardigans the most, is just buttoned at the waist. Or just the top buttoned if I'm wearing it as an A-line shape. I almost never button them all the way. So I had quite a few fitting issues with this cardigan, and it's always with the yoke section. If I'm going to have fit issues, that's where I'm going to have them, because I have quite broad shoulders and not a significant bust line, and then I think I'm fairly short through this area too, so I don't know. It's just, if there are going to be problems with the sweater, that's where it's going to be. And this is a circular yoke, obviously, so that you can have these beautiful swans, and that is not a shape that naturally fits me that well. So, and then the pattern has really cool short row shaping so that you get this nice, fairly low neckline, which I love, but that made it even more complicated as far as figuring out the shaping went. So I'm actually planning to rip this back. So I finished it in, I think, the end of April, and we had a fairly cool May. So I decided to leave it as it is for now so I could wear it a few times, and I did, and I was quite happy wearing it. But I'm going to rip it back because I think I'm going to, especially now, it's too hot to be wearing wool. So it's not a big deal if it's out of commission for a little while. And I think the problem is it's too long, right? Well, maybe that's not the only problem. I don't know. This little crease thing is caused, like, do you see how that's a line? I don't know. This is why I knit sweaters in pieces. They're so much easier to fit. but then you can't have pretty yoke designs. Okay, so what I'm thinking is if I reknit the swans on a smaller needle at a tighter gauge, then they won't be so long. And that'll shorten this up a bit, which should pull this up, which should stop some of the wrinkling from happening. And now that I say that, I don't know if that's going to actually happen. But also, knitting it at a tighter gauge will tighten up this circumference, which I think would help with the fit as well. And then the other thing is I realized, so when it's buttoned, I like that the swans face each other. But since I don't wear it buttoned at the top most of the time, to me, this whole design is beautiful. I love the way Anne Kingston designs animals, but the most beautiful part is where the swans meet. So when I redo it, I'm going to have, since two swans sit on each front, I'm going to have them facing each other this way instead of facing each other across the button band. And so that's my plan. And it shouldn't take too long. It's not that many rounds, although it is yet another I-cord bind off, which is not my favorite. And also, it's harder on my arthritis when I'm knitting this kind of sweater, the yoke, because at that point you've got all that weight from the rest of the sweater on you. But since it's such a short amount of knitting, I think it'll really be worth it. It does mean I have to rip out the bands, but I accidentally knit the bands too long anyway, so they were rippling a little, so that will be perfectly fine. Like I would have ripped them out anyway. The only thing I'm not pleased with is having to sew all these buttons back on, but that's okay. It is what it is. So, overall, I really love this sweater. I just think if I do a few tweaks, I will love it even more because I'm a perfectionist. And honestly, the other issue is I haven't been able to block it properly because my sink has been on the fritz and won't hold water in it for a very long time, and so I think that's also part of why, like, it hasn't had a chance to bloom, and so I think it'll look a lot neater once it's bloomed. This poor yarn. It deserves better. My knitting was all over the place the past few months. Anyway, this was my first time using Chickadee as a sweater, and really as a project for me. I've used it as in projects for my mom because she really likes it. It's the only regular wool she can wear against her skin. And the only reason I haven't used it in a sweater before is that I tend to assume that sport weight yarn is going to be too warm for me and that I should stick to fingering. But I was actually really pleasantly surprised. As you saw, I did shorter sleeves, and I can easily turn up that cuff because it's 2x2. And I was perfectly comfortable in like mid-60s on a sunny day. So I would definitely use that as a sweater yarn again. It's really soft and cozy. I knit it at a fairly firm gauge to try to prevent pilling. But as you can see, it is pilling a little bit already along the sleeves. But I've worn it a few times, and to me that's just the price you pay for having soft yarn, is you're going to end up having to de-pill a little more. In addition to wearing it, of course, like these sleeves were stuffed in my knitting basket, you know. So I think it's a really nice yarn, and of course it comes in all of Quince's beautiful colors. So you'll definitely be seeing more Chickadee sweaters from me. What else did I want to say, other than all my frustrations about the fit? Oh, so you might have noticed when I buttoned it that it is quite snug around the bust. And that is not because the sweater has shrunk, that is because I have grown. So over the past 6 months, I've put on a little less than 10 pounds, which is 4 kilos. Yeah. And I'm actually really happy about this. I have always wanted to be a little bit heavier, so I'm not complaining in the slightest. However, I'm not sure if the weight is going to stick around because it's possible it was being caused by medicine that I am no longer taking, and I just stopped it recently. And so I don't know whether my body is going to stay this shape or go back to its old shape. And that makes me not want to knit sweaters because right now my bust is almost 3 inches bigger than it was at this time last year. And my full bust, my high bust hasn't changed that much. And so obviously if I'm going to stay this shape, I would like to knit sweaters that fit the full bust. And my waist has grown too, but because I wear crop sweaters, when I button the waistband, I want it to be snug because I'm wearing them with like full skirts and full dresses, so it needs to tug in. And since knitting stretches, it hasn't been a problem to all my sweaters still button at the waistband. But if I button them all the way up, which luckily I don't do too often anyway, most of them definitely look too snug at the bust line right now, which is funny because I mean, I guess my waist has only grown an inch, but it's still, I don't know why. Maybe it's just to my eye. Anyway, the point is that because of that, I'm kind of on a bit of a sweater knitting hiatus. I do have a sweater out of cotton that I've nearly finished. But after that, I am just not going to knit sweaters for at least another month, because at that point I'll have been off the medicine for 2 months. So I think if my weight were going to start dropping again, I would notice it by then. Hopefully not. Hopefully I can maintain this weight. But just in case, because I don't want to start knitting sweaters for my new shape and then go back to my old shape and be sad because there's a bunch of extra fabric. And I actually think that because my shoulder line obviously hasn't grown, although my arms have, anyway, that it might be easier to do those circular yoke sweaters with my new body because I have a fuller bust line, and so that's more in line with what those kind of sweaters look best on. So that will be exciting. But yeah, because of those issues, it just is making me hesitant to knit sweaters, which drives me a little crazy, and is probably part of why I lost my knitting mojo, because sweaters are my favorite thing to knit. And I guess I could knit oversized sweaters, but I don't know. Every time that I've like detoured from the cropped cardigan shape, I end up not wearing the sweater. So I think cropped fitted cardigans, they just fit really well with my lifestyle. Not my lifestyle, my personal style. And why mess with a good thing when it takes so many hours and so much yarn in order to do a cardigan? So, yeah. It is what it is. And, I mean, you can always make, I guess, your button bands a little wider, but that looks a bit funky to me. I am curious. I would love to hear from any of you who knit fitted sweaters. So in the past, my upper bust measurement and my full bust measurement were the same, which makes it really easy to decide what size pattern to knit when you're using other patterns, or even like when you're using one of those and bud charts. But now there's like a 2 to 3 inch difference between them. And so I'm not sure which one to choose. So if you have any experience with that or any advice, I would love to hear that. I guess that's the little bit of topic for the day. Now I will read to you. So this is from The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood, who I have loved ever since I was a teenager. This is actually the first book I read by her when I was 16, but I'm now 32, so it's been long enough that I don't really remember much about it, except that I loved it. So I've decided to treat myself to a reread. And for the context, they're talking about something that happened in pre-World War I Toronto, and Renee is the housekeeper, and she's telling the main character, who is a little girl in this context, the story of when her parents became engaged, and it was at an ice skating party. So, what was she wearing? Renee knew this too, a blue knitted scarf, a tam, and knitted gloves to match. She'd knitted them herself. A winter coat of walking length, hunter green, a handkerchief tucked into her sleeve, an item she never forgot, according to Renee, unlike some she could name. So, short and sweet, but I like that her mom had knitted herself a little winter accessory ensemble, and who doesn't love blue? I also really want to know what a walking length coat was back then. Was it longer or shorter? That's what I'm curious about. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you haven't read Margaret Atwood, she's an incredible writer. Her prose is very skillful, and you can tell she's in complete control of it. And she's also very clever and biting. And so her books are wonderful, but they are not something you read when you want to be comforted. Because there's always a lot of digs at patriarchy on the milder end, but mainly explorations of the problems of patriarchy. So not exactly happy reading, but it's always wonderful. I would recommend perhaps the Penelopeia, I don't know how to pronounce that, as a starting point because it's quite short and it's a retelling of the Odyssey from the point of view of Penelope, and the hanged maids are a chorus, and it's incredibly well done. I really loved it. And on the audio, the hanged maid chorus is so creepy. So that's really good. And it's short and sweet, so it'll give you a taste of her style without the commitment that a lot of her books are longer. But if you enjoy pastiche-style books, The Blind Assassin has lots of different things. It's got newspaper clippings, it's got excerpts from a book, it's got, in addition to the actual narrative, which is one of my favorite types of novels. So, okay, let's review a yarn. I can't remember if I've reviewed this yarn before. Hopefully not. So I'm going to talk about Blue Moon Fiber Arts Gaia Fingering, which is a 100% organic merino from Argentina. It is a very light fingering weight yarn, and it comes in massive skeins, which I think is like a Blue Moon Fiber Arts trademark. So I love the fabric this yarn made. I knitted on size 0 needles, and I think I got about 8 stitches to the inch, and it made this super soft, wonderful, lightweight, cozy, but not too cozy fabric, which makes the sweater very, very wearable. However, if I were to knit with this yarn again, I would definitely knit it at a tighter gauge because, and this might just be a merino thing, I don't know if you can see, yeah. Wow, that actually looks even more dramatic on camera than in real life, but it is just all over pills. I feel like maybe I have reviewed this yarn, but that's okay. So, yep, all over. I'm definitely going to have a de-pilling session on this sweater. Even like up in the color work yoke section, you can see. It's interesting because this pink is also merino, and it's a single ply merino, but it's pilling less than the gray, even on the yoke where they see the same amount of wear. So just something to keep in mind. I would knit with this yarn again, except the problem for me is that they usually sell their skeins. They're big, so they're pricey, and it actually doesn't work out to be very expensive per yard, especially for hand-dyed yarn. However, usually I need just over 1 skein, and so that makes it really expensive because then I have to pay for all this yarn that I don't really need. So I don't know if I will actually use this yarn again in this sweater because of the color work and contrasting colors that let me eke it out with just 1 skein. But I definitely didn't have much yarn at all left over. I guess I could always do, now that I'm into shorter sleeves, and then it would be 1 skein's worth, so maybe that's what I would do. But I would knit with this yarn again. I would just, I guess, go down in needle size, but I was already at size 0s. Maybe I would just tighten up my tension, see if switching hands helped or something, and knit it at more like 9 or 10 stitches to the inch instead of 8. Yeah. I'm also not, like, it's prettier in real life than it's looking in the video, but it definitely, there's a pretty dramatic color range there, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I know that they have lots of different colorways, so I would just look for one that was still a semi-solid, but not as much variation, because, I don't know. I think I'm just not I'm not super into variegated versus, like, kettle dyed. Like, this is still there's some tone ranges, but like nothing jumps out at you. Whereas this one definitely has bits that jump out at you. So yeah. I think that if you live in a warmer climate and are looking for lightweight winter accessories, like you want a winter hat, but you don't need it to be really warm, then that yarn could be really nice because it makes a really wonderful fabric. So I would recommend it with that caveat, just know going in that it's going to pill. Okay, works in progress. I have 2. I guess I can show you the sweater I've been working on, although I haven't touched it this week. But so I'll do 3. First up, I am knitting a sock, a pair of socks eventually, but this is the first one. And these are going to be a gift for one of my friends. His favorite colors are orange and green, and this will be the 3rd pair of socks that I've knit him because he really loves the first 2. He wears them a lot, and so obviously that just makes me want to give him socks all the time. And his birthday is in August, so I wanted to give him another pair. This is Knit Pick Stroll in the grass colorway, and I am using the blueberry waffle pattern to make a nice, cozy pair of socks. It's also so every other round is just knit. So if you want a ribbed sock but you want less purling, then this could be a good option. Personally, I don't mind purling, but still. So, yep. I have finished my gusset decreases and I'm just working towards the toe, and hopefully I won't run out of yarn, but I can always do a contrast toe. Then I have a shawl going. So this is using the Celestarium pattern, which is the one that has a star chart where you put beads where each of the stars go, and otherwise it's a circular shawl, so you're just knitting stockinette in the round. And because I cannot knit sweaters at the moment, I thought this would be a really good time to do all those fingering weight projects that I always think about doing, but I always cast on another sweater instead because I'm always more interested in sweaters. And I also have a wedding coming up, and so I have my dress ready for that to be, I'm only a guest, but my boyfriend is the best man, so I want to make sure that I look reasonably fancy. And I thought that this would be nice as a shawl to wear over it in case it gets cold, and just, I don't know, a little bit fancier than a sweater maybe, because it's a sleeveless dress. It's going to be an outdoor wedding here in New York in August, so it could be really hot, but it could also be chilly. So the yarn I'm using is O Wool Fingering in the Appalachian Stone colorway. It's 100% organic merino, which is what made me decide to review the Blue Moon Fiber Arts, although now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure I've reviewed that yarn before. I need to go back through my podcast and figure out, maybe I'm just running out of yarn to review, because once I fall in love with yarn, I tend to just knit with that yarn and ignore all other yarn. Anyway, and this has been superwashed, but it's superwashed using a different process that's more environmentally friendly, and this is entirely made in the U.S., processed in the U.S. She's out of Pennsylvania, I believe, and so I think that's really cool. And during Black Friday, which is the day after Thanksgiving, in case you're not American, last November, she happened to be having a really good sale on this colorway, which is a beautiful gray with like indigo purple undertones. That's not even that. Anyway, and the thing about the Celestarium is I want to be able to both wear it as a shawl, but I also think it would be really pretty to like put on the back of the couch, especially if you're rotating it to show different stars. But if I'm going to leave anything lying out where my pets can get it, in addition to my puppy, I have a cat, then it needs to be machine washable, because occasionally they feel sick to their stomachs and they don't really have much of, they don't care where they take care of that, let's put it that way. So when I saw that this was on sale and that it is a more environmentally friendly process, I thought it would be absolutely perfect to knit myself a Celestarium out of, especially since it was a color that worked well with the night sky and all that. And I always like buying made in the US when I can because it has a lower carbon footprint. So I ordered it. I ordered 3 skeins, and it's a fingering weight, so the skeins are 100 grams and a little over 400 yards, and the pattern calls for 1,200 yards, so I should be good. And I am on chart E right now. And the cool thing about knitting a pattern that has been knit many times before is that people have done very cool things, like helpful things for it, and one person made a spreadsheet that is like a progress tracker. So I know that even though I'm into chart E and there's only one more chart to go, there's only one more increase set to go, because you're going to end up doubling it, I'm only 20% in. So once I finish chart E, I will be 30% done, and then chart F takes, once I finish that, I'll be at 90%, assuming that I do the pattern edging, which is just garter stitch, I think. You can also buy a lace edging, but honestly, I don't want to block. Like, if I just do this in stockinette and garter, I should be able to just pat it dry, as opposed to the stretchy blocking that lace requires. I don't want to do that. My blocking wires don't curve, they're the straight kind, and I just don't want to bend over pinning that. So I'll probably go with the garter stitch border for that reason. The beads I'm using are from a shawl that I knit a couple years ago and then decided to frog because I never wore it. So they are size 5 Miyuki triangular beads, and they're silver foil lined as suggested. So they're one size larger than the pattern calls for, and they're triangular, and I think that really helps them stand out. I think they really sparkle. Like, they're sparkling, they sparkle as much in real life as they do on the camera. So that's really great, since I didn't choose a black yarn. It's a little lighter in real life than it's showing up here. I'm really pleased with that, and luckily I just found, so these are the ones that are from that shawl, and then I found that I bought 2 packets back then because that pattern called for 400 beads, and I didn't even have to go into the second packet, and this pattern calls for, I think, 370, so yay, I won't have to order more beads. My preferred beading method is the crochet hook one, and I have this tiny little crochet hook that I found in one of the knitting bags I inherited from my great-grandmother, so I've been using that. Before I found that, I was using dental floss, which is a very slow and fiddly method, but it does work. And I actually think that this pattern would be a really good first beading pattern because there are so few beads per row. So even if you're using the dental floss or something like that that takes a little more time, it doesn't matter because you're only doing like 0 to 4 beads in most rounds. I think that that's just a fun way to get into beading without having to stop every like 3 stitches and add beads. The one downside to me, this is a paid for pattern and it's quite pricey, but the beading section, which is the majority of the shawl, is only charted. Now, I love charts. Almost every time I will choose charts over written patterns. But in this case, the charts are very unwieldy. So each chart shows 72 stitches. So once you get into section D, which starts about here, you have one chart for each, like you have more than one chart because you have more stitches in that. And each chart has its own page. So in a round, for section D, you have to look at 2 different pages to do 1 round. For section E, you have to look at 4 different pages to do 1 round. And I'm pretty sure for section F, you would have to look at 8 different pages to do 1 round. And it's on a grid, and every square is numbered, but because there's so many squares, trying to line up like the one thing that has the bead marker and trying to find the number takes a while. So what I'm doing after section D, I was like, this is really slow and silly. So starting with section E, and this is working really well, I go through, in about 20 lines at a time, I go through the charts, and I convert them to written directions. So each row has its own line, and I just write the number for where I need to put each bead. Oh, I should mention that I'm doing the very common modification where I'm not doing the yarn overs. The pattern is written to have a yarn over the row before a bead, and I'm just placing beads because I like how that looks better. So yeah, basically I'm converting them to written, and so I spend like, I don't know, 15 minutes going through, and then that gets me 20 rows, and then I don't have to be switching between the charts. I can just look at my little section. And that's working better, but I mean, I think it's an $8 pattern. I'm not sure how I feel about having to do all that work. I know, that sounds really childish of me. But I think this is a pattern where it would have been nice to have written directions as well as charted ones. I just don't see... I would love to hear, because it's a popular pattern, when I posted on Instagram, several people said they had knit it. How did you manage the charts? I don't usually print out charts. I just look at them on my iPhone, or my dad gave me his old iPad over Christmas, so I use that now too. But having to swipe like multiple times around, it's just not something I'm super interested in. But maybe if you print them out, it's different. So I'd love to hear how you managed it, or did you do what I did and just start writing down numbers and knitting that way? So that aside, I find this project very relaxing and soothing. It's great for TV knitting. I'm not sure I could do this as social knitting because there's not as much reference as there is with color charts, and so like if you have to put a bead on stitch 238, I just count from the closest marker, like, so I'm not sure in a social context, like it's really easy for me to count in my head as I knit stitches when I'm by myself, but if I'm also talking or listening to people talk, I'm not sure if that would work out so well. But that's okay because the socks I'm knitting right now are definitely doable for social knitting. And I'm really excited about how it's looking already. Oh, I'm using size 4s because that's what the pattern called for. I did not gauge swatch because it's a shawl. And as I said, I really want to not blah blah blah. I don't want to have to block this super aggressively, so I figured if I knit it on the fabric that I liked, then I could just pat it out to dry. That's my plan. And I cannot wait to wear it. I think it'll go really nicely with the dress I got to wear to the wedding, as well as a lot of my other clothes, because gray always fits into my wardrobe. And yeah, I think going up a size with the beads, whoops, as I smack myself in the eyeball, really helps. It's also nice because knitting on size 4s lets me use my Diet Craft Darn Pretty interchangeable needles, which are my favorite needles, but they don't go as smaller than 4, and most of my knitting is done on smaller than 4, so it's really nice to get to use them. Sorry, my nose always starts itching during podcasts. It doesn't the rest of my life. Okay, so finally, I promised you a sweater. Oh, sorry. My laundry's dry. Here we go. Okay, so I mentioned that I'm knitting this out of an organic cotton yarn. It's Biosessia. The colorway is Meadow. It's 100% organic. I believe it's made in Italy. I got it from Webs, where it was on sale during Black Friday, and it's still on sale. So I guess it's just perpetually on sale now for $5 a ball. It's fingering weight, and I believe it's 200 yards to 50 grams. So pretty good deal if you like fingering weight sweaters. And this is my first time knitting a sweater out of 100% cotton. And I'm designing it myself, and I chose this really pretty eyelet pattern. I think it's the floret eyelet pattern, but I'm not, maybe it's the quadrille. I'm not 100% sure. It's on the project page. I found it in the Barbara Walker Stitch Dictionary. I swatched quite a bit with this yarn. I was thinking I would do a more complicated lace, but it really wanted to just be plain stockinette. So I have finished one sleeve. I'm doing this raglan style, but all in pieces, mainly because I didn't want all that weight on my arms. and I figured with the cotton, seaming would help it not grow. I have finished so I did an extra long ribbed cuff so that I can turn it up if I want to, but since I plan to wear this like during summer nights, especially my boyfriend lives near the lake, and it's always cooler there, and at night it can really cool off, and there's really breezes, so I wanted to have the option of long sleeves just to be able to pull them down when we're sitting around the fire pit and suddenly I'm cold. So I have finished the ribbing on the second sleeve, but I have not started the body, which obviously is going to involve shaping yet. And then I have finished both the back and the two fronts, and I have seamed them together at the sides. So it still doesn't look anything like a sweater, does it? Let's see. There we go. So you can kind of see how I incorporated the raglan shaping there. Raglans look really funny. Anyway, this is the waist. I haven't done the button bands yet. And I actually had seamed this up the shoulders too, and I discovered that the raglan was way too short. It was like pulling at my armpit and really digging in, and that's not what I wanted. So I went ahead and pulled back and added some extra rows to both the fronts, and now I'm going to add some extra rows to the back, just to get myself a little more length. So that's why, even though I thought I had finished the back, it is now on the needles again. But yeah, there it is. I think it's really pretty. I can't wait to finish it and wear it. So I'll probably start working on this again soon. For a while, this and a pair of socks for my mom were the only projects on my needles, and the socks for my mom were also made out of a wool-free yarn, and I think that was the other thing that killed my mojo, my knitting mojo. I forgot knitting didn't have to be that uncomfortable on my hands, because obviously plant fibers just don't have the same bounce and elasticity that wool has, and so it's just rougher to knit with them, so I wasn't enjoying my knitting as much. But now that I have wool projects to alternate with, I will probably get back to work on this. I'm on a bit of a time crunch with the shawl because of the wedding, so that's going to be getting most of my work, but I think I can sneak in finishing up this too. We'll see. It would be nice to have it finished because this is one of my favorite shades of blue. And a lot of my summer wardrobe is navy blue, so this will go really nicely with it. Although we've been having it's been a hot July, so it has not been sweater weather in the slightest. This was making a bit of an appearance. And yeah, so there we have it. Just looking at this is making me miss sweater knitting, but that's okay. And then, what else? I decided to just do the waist shaping at the sides because I didn't want to break up the pattern in the middle. I think it's really pretty and deserves to just hang out on its own. So usually when I knit sweaters, I increase at both the sides and the front. And I could have increased just by going up needle sizes, but I want the cotton fabric to have as much structure as it can because I've read that cotton yarn can really grow on you. Well, expand as you wear it. So that was my thinking there. But yeah, and I call this Forget-Me-Not because they're one of my favorite blue flowers, and this just seems, and they're a little bit old-fashioned, and this sweater seems a little bit old-fashioned, like in a good way. So that's what I've been working on for the past couple of months. It was so nice catching up with you and getting to see you again. Thank you for all the comments you left here and on Instagram. I'm sorry that I'm behind on replying to them. I always read them and treasure them. It's just a question of spoons as far as how many I can reply to. So I am the charm of it on Ravelry and Instagram as well as here on YouTube. So if you want to follow me in any other context, then that's where to go. My Instagram has lately expanded to include quite a few board games because that's kind of a new hobby for me, and I tend to get really obsessive about new hobbies. So, yeah, but I am trying to focus on making sure that I include my knitting too. For a while I wasn't knitting, and it's just the same things over and over, but that's okay. So, It was wonderful to catch up with you. I'm going to go get my clothes out of the dryer, and I hope to see you again soon.